Throughout my early childhood, I was always a noticeably nervous kid. However, in October of 2016, at 10 years old, I began to lose functionality. I could not attempt, let alone complete, ordinary tasks. It became uncontrollable and ultimately began to affect my schoolwork and much more. I would arrive late to class because I had to stop and pick up all of the trash on the stairwell and then proceed to wash my hands 15 times, no more, yet certainly no less. These odd behaviors were noted by my parents, peers, and teachers, which led to an appointment with a children's psychiatrist. At this first visit, the doctor requested that I draw a diagram of my brain to represent what percentage was consumed by these uncontrollable thoughts. It's safe to say there might have been an issue. Following this visit, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. I returned to treatment once every 2 weeks and quickly made progress. 4 months after my initial visit, I was finally released from treatment. The most important thing that I learned during this time is that anxiety is a positive attribute to a certain extent, meaning that as long as you have control over your own anxiety, it can benefit you. Hello everyone, my name is Jack Burridge and I'm a senior at Durant High School. I am beyond honored to be speaking to you all today about a topic that inspires such passion in my own life. That topic is how anxiety affects the mind and body. Now, anxiety is a very commonly misused term in our society over previous years. It's often thought that anxiety is simply just a sensation of worry. While, yes, there is partial truth to the previous statement, anxiety is substantially more. So, anxiety by definition is a reaction to a perceived threat, whether legitimate or imaginary. These reactions are experiences that subconsciously occur to all of us daily. When a threat is perceived, the brain, specifically the amygdala, triggers the release of chemicals adrenaline and cortisol, placing the body in a state of fight or flight. This causes muscles in the body to tense in preparation to attack or run. Now, this reaction in the correct context is life-saving. Take, for example, an attack by a lion. If a lion were to charge at you, a fight or flight reaction will give you the best chance of survival, while that percentage still being incredibly slim. However, in other instances, such as trying to respond to an email or have an everyday conversation, it can be life-hindering. These unorthodox reactions to everyday actions is exactly what I've experienced. Following treatment, I was still anxious. However, my daily life was no longer inhibited. This state lasted until my sophomore year of high school when suddenly the odd feelings began to return. This time, however, the symptoms were significantly unalike. I experienced overbearing anxiety far more drastic than before. Panic attacks ensued periodically, and I began to notice a sharp, tense pain in my hip. So much so that in December of 2021, I found myself in the emergency room with a partial tear in my iliopsoas that had occurred during soccer practice. Now, initially, it appeared I'd been the victim of what was just yet another sports-related injury. However, this would soon be proven untrue. Anxiety is a very common yet unique issue. It's widespread in the sense that 19.1% of adults and 7% of kids suffer from an anxiety-related disorder. Yet, unique because each individual classified within this group has different issues that they struggle with. This is because anxiety relies heavily upon perception. How an individual perceives an event is how they will respond. The amygdala is the portion of the brain responsible for processing and dictating responses to external stimuli. It acts by engaging the hippocampus, the region of the brain that is commonly referred to as the encoder. The hippocampus works by taking previous threatening experiences and installing them as memories. Now, the amygdala is where the actual uniqueness of anxiety is found. Every single individual has entirely different life experiences and entirely different feelings in regards to those, thus meaning that a particular situation will most likely result in many unlike reactions. Some individuals may perceive a threat when presented with a task such as driving, while others will find enjoyment. If a situation is indeed deemed a threat, the amygdala, as previously mentioned, will release adrenaline and cortisol. Now, those two chemicals are commonly referred to as the fight or flight chemicals. When released, this pair immediately prepares the body to fight, flight, or in most cases, freeze. In this time, the body enters what can be described as a survival mode. In this mode, reactions to any situation are far more extreme, and muscles are locked into a state of tension. Now, as many of you know, with stress, our lower backs ache and our shoulders rise due to the tension. However, during my times of heightened anxiety, my hips felt abnormally tight. I would attempt to stretch them and found no relief. It is important to note that at this time, I did not know of any correlation between the pain I was experiencing in my hips and the anxiety I was also feeling. So I simply deemed this pain soreness and convinced myself it would subside. This self-diagnosis proved not to be true, and as I previously mentioned, I partially tore my iliopsoas. The doctor I was seeing at the time noted this is a very uncommon injury for younger athletes, or frankly anyone of my age. And he was finally able to piece together that this was not just another sports-related injury. It was instead the direct result of overbearing anxiety. I was experiencing such constant high levels of anxiety that my muscles were always locked into a state of tension, so much so that they began to tear. In a reaction to fight or flight, one of the body's two nervous systems takes command, that being the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is solely responsible for fight or flight reactions and is dormant the vast majority of the time. When alerted, all the sympathetic nervous system is aware of is that there's a threat. It has no eyes and certainly no ears. So the sympathetic nervous system actually has no way of dictating what that threat is, just that there is one. Now, here's where the sympathetic nervous system can cause issues. The body's two nervous systems are not able to operate concurrently. Therefore, once the body's entered a state of sympathetic arousal, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is in control the vast majority of the time, is completely and utterly powerless. Now that the body's entered the sympathetic arousal, the sole focus of the body and the brain is to protect itself from the threat at hand, meaning that the body and brain can no longer digest food, our immune system is incredibly weakened, and our body's ability to produce fresh blood cells is greatly inhibited. The psoas is an amazing indicator as to one's mental state. It is often referred to as the soul muscle of the body. If the brain is stressed, as will be the psoas. If the brain is no longer stressed, the psoas will no longer be constricted. The psoas is incredibly important for daily action. It is the body's stabilizing muscle and allows us to do things such as run and kick. Without a psoas, you would most likely just fall over due to lack of balance. I say this from experience as I found a particular balancing exercise in physical therapy to be quite challenging. With all this being noted, it is incredibly important that we understand how vital the psoas is to everyday action, and without it or with it impaired, there are plenty of mental and physical barriers. However, by reducing our levels of anxiety through forms of treatment, we can also reduce our fight or flight reactions, therefore easing tensions of muscles such as the psoas. The three forms of treatment I have used and found most effective are cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, Lexapro, which is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, or an SSRI, and seeking support from those around me. So, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short, is a form of talk therapy. It's much different than most historical psychotherapies in the sense that it is problem-focused and action-oriented. It provides an individual with coping mechanisms and information processing skills. When CBT is correctly taught and applied, it is incredibly effective at treating anxiety in one of the safest forms. Secondly, and more previously used, is Lexapro, or a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, for short, an SSRI. So, how an SSRI works is it blocks the absorption or reuptake of serotonin by nerve cells. By doing this, more serotonin is now present in the bloodstream and relaying messages to other nearby nerve cells, therefore allowing more nerve cells in the body to be receiving serotonin, ultimately providing the individual taking the medication with a far more relieving experience. Finally, and most importantly, the most effective medication or treatment I have ever taken is seeking support from those around me. Since my diagnosis 7 years ago, there's never been a moment in which someone has not been aiding me or by my side, many of which are in the audience tonight. Anxiety is not something that can be tackled alone. It is incredibly unique, hard to understand, and unpredictable. While the previous forms of treatment can absolutely reduce anxiety, they cannot cure it. There is no definite cure for this issue and absolutely no short-term resolution. Instead, it is a constant effort to understand, adapt, and cope. As I stand before you all today, I am still currently struggling with my own anxiety. Some days are harder than others. However, I choose daily to take control over my own anxiety and use it to my benefit. I hope to raise awareness about the severity of anxiety in our modern society, as it's an issue millions are affected by, yet very few truly understand the physical effects it can have on an individual. It's widespread knowledge in today's day and age that anxiety affects us psychologically, emotionally, and mentally. However, I ask you next time you are thinking or speaking about anxiety to instead consider the physical effects it can have on the individual and break the stigma around anxiety simply being an emotional issue. By doing this, we can help those who may be struggling with the physical effects of anxiety and have no idea what is going on. What I have come to firmly believe is that while anxiety is not curable, it is beatable. There is absolutely nothing in this life that can keep you from success if you do not allow it to. You are bigger than anything you will ever face and far resilient. Thank you all for attending, and I truly appreciate your time.